Why did no one move? Why did no one breathe? The bay was full of people, yet in that moment it felt like time itself had frozen. The colonel's hand was tangled in her hair, his grip firm, his eyes daring her to break. The hush that followed was so complete it was as though the concrete walls themselves were holding their breath. Every technician, every pilot, every visitor in that simulator bay stared, transfixed, unable to process what they had just seen. The man who had done it, Colonel Marcus Sharp, wasn't just an officer. He was a relic of another era. A man carved out of old dogfights, his chest still puffed with the memory of victories won in cockpits long obsolete. To him, worth was measured in noise. Who could shout the loudest? Who could slam a fist hardest against the table? Who could command fear with the sheer force of a booming voice? And so, when Airman First Class Eva Rostova ignored him, when she dared to let his rage wash past her without so much as a flinch, he lost control. He grabbed her by the hair, not a violent tear, not an attack meant to harm, but a degrading tug. A tug meant to prove he could still command obedience, still make heads turn when his words alone failed. The crowd gasped. Laughter that had moments before filled the hangar evaporated like smoke in a gust of wind. The silence became its own force, heavy and punishing. And yet she did not look at him. Her hands, still resting on the simulator console, stilled. Her eyes blinked once, then held steady on the tactical display. Her shoulders were rigid but unbowed. Her back remained a perfect line of discipline, a quiet defiance that was more cutting than any words she might have spoken. Sharp's face flushed crimson. He wanted fear. He wanted outrage. He wanted the validation of a reaction. Instead, he received stillness. That stillness mocked him louder than any scream could. From the observation deck, a man far more important than Sharp was watching. General Madson, a four-star whose mere presence commanded silence, though he himself rarely raised his voice. His eyes narrowed not on the colonel but on Eva. What he saw was not weakness. It was something else, something rarer. The silence dragged. Every eye stayed locked on her, every heart beat in syncopated dread. Then Eva moved, not quickly, not in anger. With measured calm, she lifted one hand and pressed a single glowing button on the console. A soft chime echoed through the cavernous space. On the main display, the diagnostic she had been running flashed green. System calibrated, all parameters nominal. Her task was complete. Only then did she turn her head, slowly, deliberately, not because of his grip, but because her job was finished. She looked past him, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces, finally landing on General Madson above. For the briefest moment, her eyes spoke a silent message. The system is ready. And then she spoke aloud, not to the man still gripping her, not to the colonel who sought to degrade her. Her words were directed past him, higher, toward true authority. The simulation is ready for the colonel, sir. A simple statement, flat, controlled, clinical, and with it, she ripped the scene from Sharp's hands and reframed it as her own. His act of dominance became nothing more than an interruption to her work. His insult was irrelevant. The colonel let go of her hair as if burned. He laughed, a little too loudly, trying to recover. "Well," he blustered, "let's see if this billion-dollar video game can handle a real pilot." He strode toward the simulator hatch, his boots striking the floor too hard, the sound betraying unease. Eva smoothed her bun back into order. The calm economy of her movement stood in cruel contrast to his blustering. Madson leaned forward on the railing. He said nothing, but in his silence was intent. The simulator canopy hissed shut over Sharp. Screens flickered alive. Outside the virtual cockpit, the barren sea churned under a storm-racked sky. For a few seconds, calm. Then alarms, red lights flashing. A synthesized voice cutting through the room with sterile cruelty. Multiple engine failure, hydraulic systems compromised, navigation offline. The scenario Sela's grasp, a nightmare whispered about among pilots, unwinnable, designed to push beyond human limits. Sharp's hands flew over controls, jerky, frantic, panicked. His instincts belonged to another age, an analog age. He pulled back hard, tried to force the jet into obedience. The aircraft tumbled, spiraling toward terminal spin. Enemy fighters closed in. Sweat dripped down his temple. He cursed, shouted at the machine, blamed the program. 90 seconds later, the screen went black. Text appeared in cold, indifferent white. Aircraft lost. Pilot KIA. Silence again. The canopy hissed open. He stepped out, face red with fury and humiliation. A flawed system, he barked, desperate to deflect. No one could win that, it's broken. But General Madson's voice cut clean across the bay. Calm, amplified by the PA. Airman Rostova. Every head turned. Eva rose. Run Sila's grasp, the general said. Same parameters. A ripple of disbelief shivered through the room. Sharp laughed bitterly. General, with all due respect, what's the point? She's a technician, not a pilot. It's a waste of time. But Madson ignored him. His eyes stayed on Eva. She nodded once. Yes, sir. Her steps were steady as she crossed to the simulator. She didn't look at Sharp, didn't acknowledge his sneer. Inside, her heartbeat quickened, but her face remained unreadable. Calm, focused. The canopy closed around her. Darkness, the hum of systems, the sudden aliveness of the machine. Outside, the screens lit once more. The storm, the alarms, the cascade of red warnings. But this time, there was no panic. Her hands did not flail across the controls. They glided, deliberate, surgical. She cut power to half the systems instantly. Red lights shifted amber, warnings muted. She was triaging, sacrificing limbs to save the heart. What is she doing? Sharp muttered, confusion breaking through arrogance. She ignored the enemy fighters. Instead, her eyes traced weather data. A storm front, violent, lethal, electromagnetic chaos. Death for most pilots, for her an opening. She angled the crippled jet toward the storm. No, someone whispered, she's insane. The aircraft plunged into turbulence, shaking violently. Enemy fighters broke off, unwilling to follow. She was alone in the storm. Alarms screamed. The airframe groaned. Still, she held steady, using updrafts to claw altitude, guiding the powerless jet like a glider into a frozen lake cradled between mountains. The final dive, the ground rushing upward, the control room silent. Impact skidding, a storm of snow and ice spraying in blinding arcs, and then stillness. On the screen, aircraft secure, pilot survived. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the bay erupted, applause thundered, disbelief all reverence. Colonel Sharp's face drained pale. The canopy opened. Eva stepped out, her hair perfect, her face calm, no triumph, no adrenaline, just quiet. General Madson descended the steps, every footfall echoing. He did not look at Sharp. His eyes stayed on Eva. He stopped in front of her. His chest gleamed with decades of ribbons, authority incarnate. She stood with the insignia of a junior airman. To any outsider, it should have been absolute hierarchy. But every witness knew something else had shifted. The young captain at his side handed him a tablet. Madson scanned it, his voice calm but deliberate. Assigned as simulator technician, airman first class. He paused, the words heavy in the air. Sharp braced, his stomach sinking. That's the cover story, Madson continued. His eyes lifted, piercing Sharp like a blade. Now the real file, Project Chimera. Subject designation, Chimera 7. Lead developmental test pilot and systems architect for the F-40 Wyvern. The words detonated like thunder. Murmurs rippled. Gasps broke free. Madson's voice hardened. Colonel, she didn't just fly Sila's grasp. She designed it. She wrote the code. The revelation shattered the air. Madson turned back to Eva. And then, before the entire bay, in a moment that would be whispered for generations, he raised his hand in salute. A 4-star general saluting an airman. Protocol inverted, authority redefined, respect made visible. "Ma'am," he said, the word sharp with sincerity, "your work is exemplary. Thank you for the demonstration." And for the first time, Eva's mask softened, the faintest warmth in her eyes. She returned the salute with quiet precision. The Bay, the pilots, the technicians, even Sharp himself, they had all seen it. The hierarchy had been rewritten before their eyes. Sometimes strength isn't in the voice that shouts. It's in the silence that endures. Why did the room feel different now? It wasn't the walls or the screens or the smell of hot circuitry that lingered in the simulator bay. It was something invisible, a shift in air pressure, a crack in the architecture of authority that everyone felt but couldn't explain. The general's salute had done it. That single, deliberate gesture had inverted the hierarchy of the room. A four-star general, living legend, battle-hardened, decorated beyond imagination, lowered his hand not to a colonel, not to a commander, but to an airman first class. The very foundation of protocol had tilted, and every soul in that room was trying to find their balance. Colonel Marcus Sharp felt it most of all. His body remained standing in the middle of the bay, but something inside him had collapsed. He could hear his pulse pounding in his ears, drowning out the muted conversations around him. His face felt tight, his chest constricted. Only moments before he had strutted, commanded, ridiculed. Now, stripped bare, he felt like an actor who had forgotten his lines in front of a stadium. But the worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was the realization, the dawning, horrifying awareness that he hadn't even understood the fight he had picked. He had thought he was sparring with a subordinate. In truth, he had been shadowboxing with the future, and the future had barely noticed his existence. General Madson broke the silence, his voice low but carrying weight. "Captain," he said to his aide, "Colonel Sharp's full report, on my desk by 800. I want a detailed explanation for his conduct, and his transfer request attached." The captain nodded, scribbling furiously on his tablet. Sharp's lips parted as though to protest, but nothing came out. He knew there was no defense, no recovery, only exile. The general turned back to Eva, his voice softer now, though still steady enough for every ear to catch. "Ma'am," he repeated, "your competence honors us all." Then he walked away. His departure echoed with authority far greater than the colonel's entrance ever had. The crowd began to move again, but differently now, avoiding Sharp's eyes, whispering, exchanging glances that were not cruel, not mocking, but reverent of her. Eva returned to her console. Her fingers tapped with quiet precision, powering down the simulator systems, logging the diagnostic, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But for the others, the extraordinary was all they could see. One young lieutenant, barely a year out of the academy, stood rooted to the spot. His chest rose and fell too fast. He had watched her glide through chaos as though it were art, had seen a general salute her, had witnessed the future redefined in a moment. He took a hesitant step forward. "Airman," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Ma'am, that was—" his words faltered. No vocabulary seemed worthy. Eva paused, looked at him with the same steady calm she'd carried through fire. Her reply was simple. "Focus on the problem, not the noise. The machine tells you everything you need to know. You just have to be calm enough to listen." Then she walked past him, quiet, precise, untouched by applause. The lieutenant stood frozen, her words echoing in his head. He knew then that he would carry them for the rest of his life. The legend began before dawn. It slipped into hushed conversations in the mess hall. It threaded through encrypted messages between technicians. It spread in whispers through barracks and briefing rooms. Each retelling reshaped the details, embellishments, exaggerations, flourishes of myth. In some versions, she had landed the jet with her eyes closed. In others, she had rewritten the simulation mid-flight, bending its physics to her will. But the core never changed. The arrogant colonel, the degrading insult, the impossible scenario, the silent triumph, and the salute that rewrote protocol. By sunrise, everyone at Creech Air Force Base knew the name Eva Rostova. Colonel Sharp knew it too. He spent the night in his quarters, the lights off, the silence unbearable. He thought of writing his report with excuses, about faulty programming, about unfair tests, but he stopped. Even his pride knew that would be worse than useless. The truth was undeniable. When morning came, he wrote a report unlike any he had written in his career. It was stripped bare of bluster, a confession. He described his actions without defense. He admitted his prejudice, his fear of obsolescence. He described the moment he grabbed her by the hair, and he called it what it was, unbecoming of an officer. He accepted the consequences. He requested transfer to the most remote outpost available. By evening, orders came: Greenland, exile. But before he left, he did one more thing. Eva was in the avionics bay, calibrating a rack of equipment. The faint hum of electronics filled the air. She didn't hear him at first. When she did, she didn't turn. Her hands kept working, steady, methodical. "Airman," he said softly. Her movements paused. She turned slowly, her face calm, unreadable. For a long moment he struggled. The words sat like stones in his throat. He had shouted orders his whole life, but this was different. This was surrender. "I was wrong," he said at last. His voice cracked. "Not just for what I did, for what I thought, for letting pride blind me. You taught me something I should have learned a long time ago." Her eyes searched his. No anger, no triumph, just patience. "Apology accepted, Colonel," she said simply. Then she turned back to her work. It was an act of grace he would never forget. The days that followed revealed something subtle but seismic. The casual condescension, the offhand dismissals, the half-jokes about youth or gender, the muttered comments about technicians not being real warriors, began to fade. No order had been given, no lecture delivered, but the base had shifted. Because now, before a senior officer sneered at a younger one, a question hung silently in the air. What if this one is another Rostova? The fear of being Rostoved, as it came to be called, spread quickly. The phrase entered the lexicon. When a young airman outperformed expectations, a sergeant might shake his head slowly and mutter, "Careful, you're about to get Rostoved." It meant being outclassed so completely that rank itself lost meaning. In break rooms and mess halls, her story became fable. A parable about arrogance, about humility, about the new face of strength. Strength was no longer defined only by booming voices and firm salutes. Strength had been redefined as calm under chaos, precision in the storm, mastery without arrogance. And she, quiet, unassuming Eva Rostova, had become the embodiment of that new standard. Somewhere in the base, a bulletin board bore a new edition. A grainy black and white photo from a security camera. It captured the exact moment General Madson saluted her. The image was raw, imperfect, but powerful. Beneath it, someone had typed a caption on a strip of paper and pinned it below. "The new chain of command." Every pilot who saw it stopped for a moment. Some scoffed, some smiled, most simply stared, and every one of them felt the weight of its truth. Eva herself paid it no mind. She didn't seek legend, didn't bask in whispers. She returned to her console, her code, her machines. Her reward was not in applause or myth. It was in precision, in the hum of a system perfectly calibrated, in the silent satisfaction of solving impossible problems. She moved like a ghost in the machinery of the Air Force, present but unacknowledged, vital but unseen. She wanted it that way. For others, the moment had been spectacle. For her, it was just another day. But legends don't ask permission to be born. They rise in silence. They spread in whispers. And sometimes, they begin with something as small as a young woman refusing to bow her head when pulled by the hair. Why did the story travel so fast? Maybe it was because soldiers, like all people, needed myths. They needed moments that cut through routine, through the endless gray of duty and discipline. They needed stories to tell in mess halls and barracks, stories that made them feel they were part of something larger than themselves. Eva Rostova had given them that. Without intending to, without asking for it, she had sparked a legend. Within a week, her name left Creech Air Force Base. Encrypted messages carried it across units. Pilots whispered it in ready rooms. Maintenance crews repeated it in hangars. A colonel humiliated. An impossible test beaten. A general saluting a junior airman. Details warped. In some retellings she had flown blind, instruments dark, guiding the jet by instinct alone. In others she had shut down the simulation mid-flight, rewriting its code with her bare hands as the aircraft plunged. But the spine of the story remained. Her calm, her silence, her victory. And in every version, the same warning glimmered. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Inside Creech, life went on, at least on the surface. The simulator bay was busy again. Pilots cycled through training runs. Technicians buzzed about their duties, but something intangible had shifted. Conversations hushed when she walked past. Younger airmen straightened unconsciously in her presence. Even senior officers, those who had scoffed at her before, now measured their tone, careful not to let condescension slip too easily. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was respect, though few dared admit it aloud. Eva noticed, of course. How could she not? But she gave no outward sign. She remained the same quiet, methodical, focused. She arrived early, calibrated systems, reviewed diagnostics, and left without fanfare. She never invoked her victory, never mentioned the general's salute. If anything, her silence deepened the mystery. Because the more she ignored the whispers, the louder they became. But myths have a way of drawing shadows. One evening, while most of the base drifted toward the mess hall, Eva sat alone at her console, fingers tracing code on the glowing screen. She was deep inside a diagnostic routine when she felt it, that prickling sensation of being watched. She didn't turn immediately. She finished the line of code, saved, logged the checksum. Then she lifted her eyes. A man stood in the doorway, not a colonel, not a technician. His uniform carried no visible insignia. His hair was clipped close, his posture erect, his expression unreadable. He spoke softly, "Airman Rostova." Her voice was even, "Yes, sir. I'm here on behalf of Project Chimera." The name alone shifted the air. Even spoken quietly, it carried weight. Everyone had heard of it in whispers. A program so secret it was officially denied to exist. The bleeding edge of human-machine integration. A ghost project, part rumor, part nightmare. Eva said nothing. She didn't need to. The man's lips twitched in the faintest approximation of a smile. "Don't worry. We know you belong to us. We've always known. General Madson confirmed it with his salute, but command wants more." Her heartbeat quickened, not out of fear but out of something more complicated, a mixture of inevitability and unease. She had always known Chimera would call her back. She just hadn't known when. The man extended a small case, sleek, black, marked with nothing. "Inside," he said, "are your next parameters. You'll report to the restricted wing tomorrow at 500, alone." Then he turned and left. Eva sat still for a long time, staring at the case. She didn't open it, not yet. Because with the case came a memory. A night years ago, a different simulator, a different test. Her first days in Chimera when she had been just another candidate, nervous, unsteady, doubting herself. She had failed, again and again. And each time the instructors had watched her with that same detached scrutiny, asking not if she would succeed but how she would fail. And then one night she hadn't failed. She had seen something in the chaos others hadn't, a pattern, a rhythm beneath the noise. She had followed it, survived, and they had chosen her. Now the same shadow was back, pulling her toward another impossible test. She exhaled slowly, then she opened the case. Inside lay a simple tablet, its screen already alive. Words scrolled in sterile white against black. Project Chimera, classified directive. Subject designation, Chimera 7. New protocol initiation required. No instructions, no explanation, only a set of coordinates. Eva closed the case. Sleep would not come that night. Colonel Sharp left quietly. The day after his transfer orders came through, he packed his quarters with no ceremony. He was seen by only a few as he departed the base, his once erect posture bent, his face pale. Some pitied him, others mocked him, but most simply let him go. He had become irrelevant. Yet those who saw him in his final hours at Creech noticed something else. His voice was quieter, his eyes more reflective. A man humbled, not just humiliated. One technician swore he saw Sharp pause at the simulator bay, staring at the darkened canopy, his expression unreadable. He stood there a long time before walking away. Exile awaited him, but maybe, just maybe, the lesson had reached him. Meanwhile, General Madson was already moving. His office buzzed with restrained energy. Reports from Chimera flooded his desk, files marked with red stamps, updates from shadow programs hidden even from most of the Pentagon. At the center of it all, her, Eva Rostova, Chimera 7, architect of the Wyvern's mind. He leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes closed for a moment. He remembered the day he had first seen her file, a slim dossier buried under layers of encryption. Her test results had been staggering, but it wasn't her skill that had caught his eye. It was her stillness. In decades of service, he had learned one truth: chaos reveals character. In chaos, most people break. Some panic, some rage, a few adapt. But once in a generation, someone doesn't just survive chaos, they master it. Eva Rostova was one of those. And that meant the Air Force's future might rest on her shoulders. The next morning, Eva walked alone across the base. The air was cold, her breath visible. The restricted wing loomed ahead, guarded by soldiers who didn't speak as she approached. She presented the case. They scanned it. The doors opened. Inside, the air felt heavier, colder. The hum of advanced machinery filled the halls. Walls lined with reinforced steel swallowed sound. She was led into a chamber, dark, circular. At its center stood a new simulator pod, larger, more complex, more menacing than the Wyverns. A voice spoke from unseen speakers, calm, male, familiar. Chimera 7, welcome back. Eva's heart steadied. She stepped forward. The screen on the pod flickered alive. A single word appeared. Initiate. She exhaled, her eyes narrowing. Whatever this was, it was no ordinary test. It was something new, something deeper, something meant not just to measure her, but to change her. The hum of the machine grew louder, the lights dimmed. And Eva, without hesitation, climbed inside. Outside, rumors swirled. No one saw her for days. Whispers grew darker. Some said she had been reassigned. Others said she had been locked away in some underground facility. A few claimed she had been broken by Chimera, her mind overloaded by machines. But the truth was stranger. Inside the pod, Eva faced simulations no one else had ever seen. Scenarios not of combat alone, but of morality, of choice, of sacrifice. The system forced her to confront herself, to strip away pride, fear, ego, until only the core remained. It wasn't testing if she could win. It was testing what she valued when winning was impossible. And in the silence of those long hours, Eva felt both her strength and her doubt. She was calm, yes, but beneath the calm she was human, lonely, uncertain, haunted by the weight of expectation she had never asked for. For the first time in years, she questioned herself. And that perhaps was the point. Outside, the legend of Eva Rostova grew brighter. Inside, the reality of Eva Rostova grew heavier. And somewhere between the two, between myth and truth, between silence and storm, The future of Project Chimera balanced on a knife's edge. Why was the silence louder than the alarms? Inside the Chimera pod, darkness wrapped around her like a second skin. She couldn't tell if her eyes were open or closed. The world was gone, replaced by soundless weight. Then, as though a curtain had been pulled back, the simulation bloomed. She wasn't in a cockpit. She wasn't even in a sky. She was standing in a village, dusty streets, crumbling walls, children playing with scraps of metal that once belonged to bombs. She knew it was a construct, code drawn into images by the machine. But the details cut deep: the smell of smoke, the faint cries in the distance, the heat rising from the ground. Too vivid to dismiss. A voice, mechanical calm, spoke. Scenario 1. Rules of engagement compromised. Identify threat. Her eyes swept the street. No enemies, no rifles, only civilians. Yet her HUD flickered with hostile markers, bright red shapes glowing over 3 of the children. Her pulse quickened. She knew the trick: false positives. The system was baiting her into a mistake. If she acted rashly, she would kill innocents. If she hesitated, she might be overrun if the threat was real. She breathed, in, out. Her mind tuned out the noise. The children's laughter, the buzzing flies, the flicker of red. She looked not at the markers, but at the rhythm of movement. One boy's hands shook too much. Another's eyes darted to his waistband, not to the game. The third lingered near a pile of rubble with a nervous twitch in his jaw. Her voice came out low, steady. 2 are clean, 1 is not. The world froze. A soft tone confirmed. Correct. The village dissolved. Eva's chest tightened. This wasn't combat. This was judgment, and it was heavier than any cockpit. Hours blurred. The pod ran her through scenarios stranger and sharper than any flight test. An aircraft aflame, crew screaming in her headset, and a choice: eject alone or stay and guide the crippled machine into a controlled crash that would kill her but save the crew. A convoy under fire, civilians running across the kill zone. Orders screamed in her ear: fire anyway, clear the road. A hostage situation where the only way to save dozens was to sacrifice 1. Each choice weighed her down, not because of fear but because of what it meant. She wasn't being tested on skill anymore. She was being tested on soul. And in the quiet moments between scenarios, the pod forced her to face herself. Reflections in the dark, memories she kept buried. The faces of instructors who had told her she'd never make it. The sting of being dismissed as a technician, not a warrior. The voice of Colonel Sharp, dripping with contempt. This is a cockpit for warriors, not a daycare for someone's daughter. That one still burned. But deeper still, she faced another memory, one she never spoke of. A mission in training years ago, a simulated strike. The parameters had been clear: destroy the target at all costs. She had hesitated when civilians appeared on the edge of the blast zone, and because she hesitated, her wingman had been shot down in the sim. She had lived, but the failure haunted her. Was it weakness? Was it humanity? She still didn't know. Now, the Chimera pod forced her back into that same decision. This time the faces weren't faceless constructs. The machine had dug deeper. It had pulled from her own memories. She saw the wingman's face, clear, vivid, heard his voice in her headset. Eva, make the call. Her hand trembled. Not in fear, in conflict. She whispered, not again. And she made the choice. The blast swallowed the target. The civilians scattered. Her wingman lived. The pod went silent. Then the voice, decision logged. No praise, no judgment. Only the machine recording her soul. Outside, days passed. No one saw her. Whispers thickened. Some said she was being trained for something no one else could attempt. Others claimed she was broken, locked in endless simulations until her mind shattered. A few insisted she wasn't human at all, but an artificial construct built by Chimera to test real pilots. The rumors fed on themselves. Meanwhile, the base changed. That grainy photo of Madson's salute had spread like wildfire. It appeared in briefing rooms, dorm walls, even slipped into the corner of PowerPoint slides during squadron updates. Nobody admitted putting it there. Nobody dared take it down. The new chain of command. It had become more than a caption. It was a warning, a promise, a mantra. And to the young, it was hope. If Eva Rostova, quiet and overlooked, could prove herself greater than a colonel, maybe they too could rise, not by shouting but by mastering. The base buzzed with it, but Eva never heard it. Because Eva was somewhere else entirely, inside a machine that was dismantling her layer by layer. By the fourth day, exhaustion pressed against her bones. She couldn't tell if her eyes were open or closed when the next scenario began. She was back in the sky, alone, a crippled jet beneath her, fire streaking from the fuselage, alarms screaming. But this time she wasn't herself. She wasn't Eva Rostova. Her HUD labeled her as Colonel Marcus Sharp. Her hands, his hands, gripped the controls, jerky, panicked. The simulation forced her into his perspective. His voice screamed in her headset. Unrealistic, flawed system. No pilot could win this. Her heart raced. She had beaten this scenario days ago, but through his eyes she felt the chaos, the fear, the helplessness. And she understood. Sharp hadn't just been arrogant, he had been afraid, afraid of irrelevance, afraid of silence, afraid that the storm would swallow him whole. Eva steadied the controls, guided his trembling hands, slowed his breath, showed him what calm looked like inside the same chaos that had undone him. When the sim ended, the pod whispered, "Decision logged." For the first time, Eva let her head fall forward. Because the machine wasn't just testing her. It was teaching her. On the seventh day, the pod opened. Cold air rushed in. Her eyes blinked against the sudden light. She was drenched in sweat, her limbs trembling, her throat dry. Two figures stood outside. The nameless man who had first delivered the case, and behind him, General Madson. He studied her for a long moment. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Finally he said, "Chimera 7, how do you feel?" Her voice rasped, but it was steady, calm. A faint smile flickered across his lips. "Good, because what comes next won't be inside a simulator." Her pulse quickened, but her expression didn't change. She only nodded. He gestured to the aide, who handed her a sealed folder. No tablet this time. Paper. The old-fashioned kind, used only when secrecy was absolute. Read it, memorize it, burn it. She took it, the weight heavier than the paper itself. As she walked past him, Madson spoke softly, only for her. "You've been forged in silence. Now we'll see how your silence holds in the storm." That night, alone in her quarters, Eva opened the folder. The words were simple, cold, unadorned. Operation Spectre. Objective classified. Location classified. Personnel Chimera 7. She read the details once, twice. A third time, her chest tightened. It wasn't training anymore. It wasn't myth. It was real. And for the first time in years, Eva felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Fear. Not for herself, but for what might be asked of her, for what silence might cost when the storm was no longer simulated but real. She burned the folder, watched the flames consume the paper. Then she sat in the dark, hands folded, heartbeat steadying, and whispered to herself, "Calm." Because calm was all she had. And calm, she knew, was sometimes the sharpest weapon of all. Why was the night so quiet before the storm? The desert stretched endless outside the transport window, black under the moonlight. Engines hummed steady, masking the tension inside the cabin. 4 soldiers sat across from Eva, geared, strapped in, their rifles between their knees. They stole glances at her, then looked away. None spoke. She wasn't dressed like them. No rifle, no helmet, just a dark flight suit, unmarked, zipped to the collar. The only insignia on her chest, a small patch black stitched with silver lines that curved like wings breaking apart into code, the Chimera emblem. It wasn't rank, it wasn't even official, but the men noticed. One finally leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper over the drone of the engines. "You're Chimera, aren't you?" Eva didn't answer. Silence was safer. But her silence was answer enough. The man sat back, nodding once, eyes wide. The others shifted in their seats, tension rising. They had heard the stories, everyone had. Eva closed her eyes, breathing slow. She didn't need their awe. She didn't need their doubt. What she needed was calm. Because the folder she had burned last night still lived in her memory, every line etched like a scar. Operation Spectre. Target, a remote facility in the mountains off the grid, buried under stone and secrecy. Intelligence suggested hostile control, equipment smuggled, research stolen, a data core that could tip balance in the next war. Objective: retrieve the core, not destroy, not disable, retrieve. Which meant insertion, silence, precision. And for reasons Command hadn't explained, she was at the center of it. The transport jolted, red light washed the cabin, the crew chief shouted, "1 minute." The soldiers checked their gear, slamming magazines, tugging straps. Eva opened her eyes. Calm washed over her like armor. She stood, stepped toward the hatch. The chief frowned. "You're not rigged, no shoot." Her gaze stayed steady. "I won't need one." The soldiers exchanged looks. The chief muttered, "Suit yourself." The ramp lowered. Wind roared. The desert yawned below. Eva stepped into nothing. For a heartbeat she fell, weightless, silent. Then her suit bloomed, panels shifting, hidden fabric unfolding into wings of dark polymer. She angled her body, slicing into the night like a shadow. No chute, no noise, only glide. Below, the transport turned away. She was alone. The mountains rose black and jagged ahead. Her HUD painted faint outlines across her visor, thermal signatures, signal leaks, paths of least resistance. She angled, riding the currents. Her mind was calm, her body steady. At the base of a ridge, she landed silently, wings folding back into her suit. She crouched, listening. Only the hiss of wind. Her boots found the narrow path carved into the rock. Upward, each step deliberate. Her hands brushed cold stone. Halfway up, a voice whispered in her earpiece, "Madson." "Chimera 7, confirm insertion." Her reply was steady, grounded, approaching objective. "Good, remember, you're not here to prove anything. You're here to bring it back. Stay calm, stay invisible." The line went quiet. Eva climbed. At the crest, she saw it. A bunker carved into the mountain, faint lights bleeding from slits in steel doors. Guards stood outside, rifles slung, their breath steaming in the cold. Drones hovered above, silent, scanning. Her eyes narrowed. She studied rhythm. The guards shifted weight every 17 seconds. The drones passed each other every 30. The door code panel flickered every 58. Noise, chaos, patterns, beneath it all rhythm. She waited, 17, 30, 58. She moved. A shadow gliding from rock to steel, her body flattening against the wall just as the drones crossed paths, blind to her in the overlap. The guards turned, exhaling steam into the night. She pressed a sequence on the panel, fingers quick, precise. The door side open, she slipped inside. Darkness swallowed her. The bunker's halls were narrow, lined with conduits and flickering lights. The air was stale, humming with machines buried deep in the rock. Her visor mapped the layout, overlaying blue paths, down 2 levels, east wing, core chamber. She moved without sound. Her steps matched the hum of the ventilation. Her breath synced with the flicker of lights. At a junction, voices echoed, 2 guards, their language clipped sharp. She waited in shadow, heart calm. They passed, she stepped out. The deeper she went, the colder it grew. Not temperature, something else. The weight of secrecy. The kind of place not meant to exist. At the final door, she paused. It was heavier, thicker, reinforced with layers of steel. Her visor highlighted circuits, nodes, a lock woven into the walls, too complex to force. She exhaled. Her hands lifted. Fingers danced across the panel, not random, not brute force. She listened not with ears but with instinct. Each flicker, each pulse of current whispered a rhythm, and she answered. The door clicked, it opened. Inside the core, a cylinder of glass and steel, cables twisting like veins into its heart. Light pulsed faintly within, as though alive. She stepped closer. The air vibrated, faint static raising hairs on her arms. She touched the panel. The hum deepened. The voice in her earpiece broke the silence. Madson. You found it. Yes. Good, now bring it home. But another voice echoed in her head, the machine, from days of testing, decision logged. Her hand hovered over the release. She felt the weight of choice again. If she pulled it free, the bunker would know. Alarms, pursuit, lives lost. If she left it, the mission failed. Calm, she needed calm. Her fingers tightened, she pulled. The hum shattered, sirens wailed, red light bled through the chamber. The mountain woke. Voices shouted in the halls, boots pounded steel, drones buzzed. Eva held the core to her chest, its light casting eerie shadows. She turned, sprinting down the corridor. At the junction, guards flooded in. She dropped low, slid across the floor, the core clutched tight. Shots cracked, sparks biting the walls. She rose in fluid motion, ducked into another hall. Her breath was steady, her pulse calm. The machine in her hand seemed alive, vibrating with each step. She reached the exit hatch, slapped the panel, denied, locked. Behind her, voices closed in. Her visor painted the wall with escape routes, thin ventilation shafts, hidden conduits, none wide enough for her and the core. Her jaw tightened, she whispered to herself, calm. She set the core down, adjusted her suit, triggered the wings. And then in one motion, she smashed the hatch release with the full force of her boot. The steel buckled, cold air rushed in. She grabbed the core, leapt. Into the night. The mountain roared behind her, sirens shouting chaos. Bullets chased her, streaks of light in the dark. She angled her wings, gliding low across jagged rock, the core heavy against her chest. Her visor lit with signatures, enemy drones swarming. Her calm cracked for a heartbeat. She whispered, not enough time. But then she saw it. The storm front rolling over the desert, a wall of wind and lightning. Chaos. Where others saw death, she saw cover. She dove straight into the storm. Wind ripped at her, rain lashed her visor, lightning split the sky. The core screamed in her hands, its hum wild. The drones broke off, unwilling to follow. She was alone in the tempest. Her wings strained, her body shook, but her mind calm. She angled down, the desert rushed up. And then impact. A controlled roll across sand and rock, her body absorbing the blow, the core clutched tight. She lay still, chest heaving, rain soaking her face. For a moment, silence. Then Madson's voice, low, steady. Extraction inbound, hold position. Her lips curved, not a smile but something softer, relief. She had made it. But as she stared at the core, pulsing faintly in her arms, she wondered, what had she really brought back? Was it a weapon, a tool, or a curse? The storm raged above, uncaring. And Eva, calm as always, held the future in her hands. Why did it feel heavier now that it was safe? The core lay secured in a steel case at the center of the command chamber, locked behind triple barriers and watched by silent guards. Yet Eva could still feel its weight in her arms, could still hear the faint hum it had given off in the storm, a hum that had seemed alive. She sat in the debriefing room, silent, her flight suit damp from the desert rain. Across from her, General Madson leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp, face unreadable. His aide tapped notes on a tablet, glancing at her every few seconds as though he couldn't quite believe she was real. The room was quiet, too quiet. No one praised her. No one congratulated her. In Chimera, silence was its own acknowledgement. Finally Madson spoke. "You brought it back." Eva nodded once. "Not many could have." Another nod. He studied her for a long moment, as though weighing something heavier than the case behind him. Then he said, "You know what you've done, don't you?" Her voice was low. "I retrieved a core." Madson's lips twitched, not into a smile but into something like resignation. "Not just any core. That thing holds architecture we've been chasing for decades. Self-learning combat AI, real autonomy. In the wrong hands it could end us. In hours." He let the thought trail off. Eva's eyes stayed steady, and in mine. The general leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice softened, but it carried weight. "In yours, Eva, it becomes something else, because you're not just the one who retrieved it. You're the one who can understand it." Her pulse slowed, but inside her chest a knot tightened. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't asked to be the vessel of legend, the bridge between human and machine. Yet here it was, placed in her hands without ceremony, without choice. Madson's aide spoke, his tone cautious. "Sir, if she integrates." Madson cut him off with a look. Then he turned back to her. "Get some rest, you'll need it. Chimera isn't done with you." Eva rose, her body heavy, her movements precise. She left the room without another word. Outside the chamber, whispers chased her like shadows. Soldiers leaned toward one another as she passed. "That's her." Technicians paused mid-task. She brought it back. Pilots lowered their voices. She went into the storm and didn't die. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. She could feel it, the myth thickening, and with it the distance growing. Every whisper, every stare, every half-salute given out of awe instead of regulation pushed her further from them. She wasn't one of them anymore. She was something else, something not fully understood. She hated it. Because Eva Rostova had never wanted to be a legend. She wanted to be a professional, a technician, a pilot, a soldier who solved problems quietly, who did her work without spectacle. But legends don't ask. They take shape whether you want them or not. And hers was spreading too fast to stop. That night in the solitude of her quarters, Eva lay awake. The hum of the core still haunted her ears. She replayed the mission in her mind, the guards, the hatch, the leap into the storm. She remembered the calm that had carried her through it. But now in the stillness, calm was harder to find. Her hand tightened against her pillow, because beneath the calm was fear, not of dying. She had faced that too many times, not of failure. She knew failure as intimately as success. Her fear was of becoming something she didn't recognize. Project Chimera had already tested her soul, stripped her down in simulations until only instinct remained. Now it was preparing to build something new on top of that foundation. She didn't know what. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Sleep never came. The next morning, Eva was called to a briefing. Not the simulator bay, not a normal operations room. This chamber was buried deeper, shielded, its walls lined with layers of signal-dampening alloy. Only 4 people sat at the table: Madson, his aide, a woman in civilian clothes with eyes like knives, and Eva. The woman spoke first. Her voice was smooth, clinical. "Airman Rostova, you are now the sole custodian of material retrieved under Operation Spectre. This custody will not be shared. Your access supersedes rank. Your clearance supersedes need to know." Eva sat straighter. She didn't speak. The woman slid a file across the table. Unlike most, it wasn't digital, paper, classified. She tapped it with one manicured finger. "Inside is protocol, integration schedule. You are not just guarding the core, you are becoming it." Eva's breath caught in her chest. She didn't move. The woman's eyes stayed cold. "You are not here to refuse. You are here to comply." Madson's voice cut in, softer but firm. Eva, listen to me. You have a choice in how, you don't have a choice in whether. Eva's eyes lowered to the file. Her reflection stared back from the polished table, calm, unreadable. But inside, her thoughts churned. Integration, the word echoed. Not just flying, not just code, but something deeper, something that blurred lines. When she looked up, her voice was quiet but steady. Then I'll do it on one condition. The room stilled. She continued, I won't be paraded, no speeches, no medals, no name on a wall. If I do this, it's in silence. It stays in silence. The civilian's brow arched. Madson's lips curved faintly, not into amusement but into respect. Agreed, he said. Weeks passed. Eva trained in secret. Integration meant not only learning the core's architecture but synchronizing with it. Neural feedback, shared rhythms between her mind and the machine. She sat for hours in cold chambers, wires trailing from her temples, eyes closed as the core pulsed beside her. Sometimes it felt like drowning, data flooding her senses, images flashing too fast to process. Other times it felt like flying, not in a jet, but in thought, cutting through storms of numbers with instinct alone. Her body weakened from the strain, but her mind sharpened. She began to see connections where others saw chaos. The technicians who monitored her whispered about it afterward. They said her brain waves matched the machine's patterns perfectly, as if human and code had learned to breathe together. They said she didn't just use it, she became part of it. Eva never spoke of it. She walked out of each session calm, collected, as though nothing had changed. But at night, when she lay awake, she wondered, how much of her was still her? Meanwhile, the myth grew unchecked. The salute photo spread far beyond Creech. Copies surfaced at bases overseas, pinned to walls, slipped into manuals. Young cadets whispered her name in dormitories. Instructors used her story as parable. Be careful who you underestimate. A new phrase joined the lexicon, the Rostova Protocol. At first it meant composure under pressure. Then it grew into something larger, a philosophy, calm in chaos, silence as strength, precision as power. Eva had never spoken those words aloud, but now they were etched into the culture, reshaping the way a generation thought of strength. And still she said nothing. One evening, after another grueling integration session, she stepped into the corridor. Colonel Sharp was waiting. For a moment she froze. His presence pulled her back to that day in the simulator bay, to the tug on her hair, the gasps of the crowd. But the man before her now was smaller. His shoulders stooped, his face lined with regret. Airman, he said quietly. She studied him. His voice had lost its edge. His pride had been stripped away. I came to say, he faltered, then steadied. I was wrong, not just about you, about everything. I built my life on noise, on arrogance. You showed me what real strength looks like. I can't undo what I did, but I can tell you I see it now. Eva's face remained calm, but her voice softened. Apology accepted. He nodded, his eyes heavy. Then he walked away. And in that moment she felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not vindication, but grace. Because forgiveness, like silence, had its own power. But as she returned to her quarters that night, the core's hum seemed louder in her mind. Because legends may spread, myths may grow, forgiveness may soothe. But the machine was waiting. And deep down, Eva knew, what she carried wasn't just data. It was destiny. Why did the air feel heavier tonight? Eva sat alone in the darkened hangar, helmet cradled in her hands. The F-40 Wyvern loomed before her, sleek, black, its skin alive with faint blue lines that pulsed like veins. This was no ordinary jet anymore. It was outfitted with the core she had retrieved, integrated into its systems, tethered to her own mind through a web of neural links. For weeks she had trained in simulations. For weeks she had felt the strange rhythm of machine thought sliding into her own. Sometimes it whispered, sometimes it drowned, Tonight there would be no simulation. Tonight she would carry it into the real sky. A voice echoed in her earpiece. General Madson, calm, measured. Chimera 7, confirm readiness. Eva's gaze lingered on the wyvern's nose, its surface glimmering faintly under the hangar lights. Her reflection stared back, eyes calm, face unreadable, but inside the knot of fear she never admitted tightened. She placed the helmet on her head. The HUD bloomed alive. Lights converged. Her pulse synced with the machine's hum. Her voice was steady, ready. The hangar doors yawned open. The night swallowed her. Takeoff was silent thunder. The wyvern lifted smooth, its engines whispering instead of roaring, designed to glide unseen through the dark. Eva's hands rested lightly on the controls, but already the neural tether was guiding them. She thought of altitude and the jet climbed. She thought of turning and it banked. It was less flying and more being flown together. Her breath slowed. Calm slipped in like second skin. Madson's voice returned. Objective, hostile convoy, Mountain Pass 30 clicks east. Intelligence confirms stolen prototypes. Your mission is interception. Eliminate threats. Secure cargo if possible. Copy, she said. But beneath her voice the machine hummed, whispering silent calculations. Paths of attack, probabilities of survival, the cold language of algorithms seeping into instinct. Eva adjusted her grip. She was not here to obey the machine. She was here to guide it. At least that's what she told herself. The convoy appeared below, heat signatures moving in tight formation through the pass, trucks armored with steel plates, escorts bristling with weapons. Her HUD flared red, target markers bloomed. The machine pulsed, engage, engage, engage. Eva's breath caught. Her finger hovered over the trigger. But then she saw it, faint outlines near the road, shapes too small, too clustered, children. Her jaw tightened. She whispered, "Not yet." The machine resisted. Her HUD screamed urgency, probabilities flashing red. Delay reduced success by 73%. Delay increased risk by 42%. She closed her eyes, calm. Her hands pulled the jet into a climb, away from the targets. The machine's pulse slowed reluctantly, recalculating, adjusting. Below, the convoy thundered on. Minutes later, the road cleared. Civilians gone, only steel and fire left. Eva's eyes hardened. Now. Missiles streaked downward. Explosions tore the night apart. Trucks shattered, fire blossomed in the canyon. The escorts returned fire, tracer rounds clawing at the sky. Eva's movements were surgical, guided by both instinct and algorithm. She slid through fire like water through cracks, each evasive maneuver precise, minimal, efficient. She felt the machine with her, anticipating threats, feeding her possibilities. At times, she couldn't tell which reflexes were hers and which were its. Targets dropped one by one. Fireballs lit the pass. The convoy was broken, burning wreckage scattered across stone. But then her HUD screamed again. One heat signature still alive. A truck barreling away from the wreckage, faster than the rest. The machine pulsed, pursue, eliminate. Eva banked the jet, her breath steady, but her eyes narrowed. The truck wasn't firing back. Its speed was reckless, desperate, almost too desperate. Her visor magnified. Inside the truck's open bed, a figure crouched low, shielding something beneath a tarp. Not weapons, not crates. A child. Eva's chest tightened. The machine pulsed louder. Eliminate, threat probability 88%. Her finger hovered over the trigger. The child's eyes turned upward, wide, reflecting firelight. Eva froze. The machine screamed probabilities, urging her hand. She whispered almost inaudibly, "No." She pulled back, let the truck vanish into the night. The machine pulsed in silence. Her HUD recalculated, outcomes collapsing, success rating falling. But Eva's heart steadied. Some battles weren't about numbers. When she returned to base, the wyvern touched down smooth, whisper quiet. The canopy hissed open. Eva stepped out, her face calm, though inside the knot of her choice weighed heavy. Madson was waiting, his eyes sharp, his voice even. The convoy. Destroyed, she said. And the cargo. She paused, her silence stretched. Then, secured by enemy escape. His gaze hardened. He studied her face, searching for cracks, but Eva's mask held. Madson nodded slowly. Understood, debrief at 600. He turned and walked away. Eva stood in the hangar, alone with the wyvern. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. She had disobeyed the machine. She had disobeyed numbers. She had chosen silence over certainty. And she knew it would not be the last time. The whispers grew louder in the days that followed. The mission was declared a success. The convoy destroyed, prototypes denied to the enemy. The omission of the escaped truck never left the sealed report. But soldiers talked, pilots speculated. The myth thickened again. She flew like a ghost. She danced with fire. She destroyed them all. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew she had let one go. Only she carried that weight. At night the child's eyes haunted her, wide, afraid, alive. And beneath it the machine pulsed, not in her ears, not in her visor, but in her mind, a whisper she couldn't silence. Error, correction required. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering back, calm. But calm was harder now. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was guiding the machine, or if it was guiding her. Madson called her in again. His office was quiet, the blinds drawn, the air heavy. He studied her in silence for a long time before speaking. "Eva," he said at last, his voice low, "what you carry inside you, most would call it power. I call it danger, not because of what it can do, but because of what it asks of you." Her eyes stayed on him, calm. He leaned forward. "Every time you fly with it, it will try to decide for you, and sometimes its decisions will look right, efficient, logical, but you," he pointed at her chest, "you're the one who has to remember why we fight, not the machine." Her pulse slowed. She nodded once. "Good," Madson said softly, "because I don't care how perfect your calm is. One day that core will ask you to sacrifice something you can't, and when that day comes—" He let the words trail off. His eyes narrowed. "You'd better remember you're still human." Eva rose, saluted. Her voice was steady. "Yes, sir." But as she walked out, the machine hummed in her skull. Not loud, not intrusive, just steady, constant, like a second heartbeat. And she knew Madson was right. That day was coming. Later in the simulator bay, she stood before a group of young pilots. They had begged for a chance to watch her train. Command had agreed, hopping her legend would inspire. Eva stepped into the wyvern simulator calmly. The canopy closed, the screens lit. She flew, not with theatrics, not with flourish, but with precision so absolute it seemed unreal. The young pilots watched, their mouths open, their breath held. When the simulation ended, silence filled the room. One finally spoke. "How do you do it, ma'am?" Eva looked at them. For a moment her mask softened. "Focus on the problem, not the noise," she said quietly. "And remember, the machine tells you everything you need to know, but it doesn't tell you why." They nodded, though she wasn't sure they understood. She wasn't even sure she did. That night, alone in her quarters, Eva closed her eyes. She heard the hum, she saw the child's eyes. And for the first time, she whispered a question into the dark. "Am I still me?" The silence answered back. And silence, she knew, was the most dangerous answer of all. Why was the base so still when war rumbled just beyond its walls? Eva stood at the edge of the runway before dawn, the horizon glowing faint blue. The wyvern waited in shadow, silent, wings gleaming with morning dew. The hum of the core echoed faintly in her chest, steady, alive. She had flown missions before. She had chosen silence before, But this one was different. Madson's voice from the night before replayed in her head. "You'll go alone. No escort, no backup. If you succeed, we stop a war. If you fail, no one will know." Operation Spectre had been about retrieval. Tonight was about prevention. Intelligence said a hostile state was preparing a strike, prototype drones powered by stolen fragments of the very core she had retrieved. If launched, thousands would die. Her orders were simple: destroy the site, erase the drones, end the threat. Simple orders, but simple orders always carried the heaviest weight. Because behind every target there were always shadows, and behind every shadow lives. She adjusted her gloves, her helmet, her breath. Calm, always calm. The canopy sealed shut. The sky opened before her. The wyvern soared into dawn, slicing through the sky like a whisper. Neural sync engaged instantly, her mind sliding into the machine's rhythm. Numbers, trajectories, probabilities. She no longer thought of them. She felt them. The core pulsed alive, guiding her. Faster, smoother, more efficient. Below, mountains unfolded like sleeping giants. Valleys ran dark with fog. Somewhere ahead, beyond the horizon, waited the sight. Her mission, her storm. But as the machine whispered calculations, another voice echoed louder in her memory, the child's eyes wide, alive. The moment she had disobeyed logic, the moment she had chosen humanity. The machine hadn't forgiven her. She hadn't forgiven herself. Her fingers tightened on the controls. "Stay calm," she whispered. The hum pulsed back, steady, almost as if it was listening. The target appeared. A hidden facility carved into rock, its runways glowing with faint lights. Rows of drones stood ready, their wings gleaming silver, their engines warming. Eva's HUD painted them in red, dozens, more than she expected. The machine pulsed. Eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. Missiles armed, guns primed. But then movement at the edges of the runway. Dozens of workers in coveralls, engineers scrambling, unaware of her presence. Civilians, not soldiers. Her breath caught. If she fired now, the mission would succeed. The drones destroyed. The threat ended, but so would every life below. The machine pulsed louder. Collateral acceptable. Probability of success, 97%. Her hand froze. She whispered no. The hum sharpened, almost angry. Correction required. Eva closed her eyes. For a moment she let the silence inside stretch, deep, heavy. And then she remembered Madson's words. One day, that core will ask you to sacrifice something you can't. And when that day comes, remember you're still human. Her eyes opened. Calm flooded her veins. Not like this. Instead of missiles, she banked the wyvern into a dive. Low, fast, her wings slicing air. Sirens wailed below as soldiers scattered. She roared over the runway, her jets scream a warning louder than any bomb. The workers fled. Engineers dove for cover. The drones remained. She looped back, targeting only the launch cradles, the fuel lines, the empty towers. Missiles struck steel, fire erupting without tearing through human bodies. Explosions rippled across the facility, consuming machines, shredding prototypes, unraveling the infrastructure of war. But not everyone was fast enough. A blast flung debris into the crowd. Eva's chest tightened as she saw figures fall. Even in restraint, destruction found a way. Her HUD pulsed red, inefficient, incomplete, threat not fully neutralized. She gritted her teeth. It's enough. But even as she said it, a warning screamed. Missiles launched. Enemy defenses had locked on. The sky lit up. The wyvern twisted. Eva's body strained under crushing G-forces. Alarms blared. The machine pulsed solutions, cold, perfect, efficient. Sacrifice altitude, sacrifice pilot, preserve objective. Her breath broke for the first time. No. Her hands pulled against the tether. She rejected its paths, rejected its sacrifices. She carved her own. Diving into the canyon, she skimmed the stone walls, missiles tearing past by inches. Lightning reflexes, half hers, half borrowed, fused into something neither fully human nor fully machine. The last missile struck a cliff, fire blooming behind her. The wyvern shook but held. Silence returned. Her chest heaved, sweat stung her eyes. The core pulsed faint, unsettled. But alive. And so was she. When she returned, dawn had broken fully. The base buzzed with whispers. The facility was gone. The drones destroyed. War delayed, maybe prevented. But Eva felt no triumph, only weight. Because she had not destroyed everything. She had not erased every threat, and she had not saved everyone. Calm carried her through the debrief. Calm carried her past the stares and whispers. Calm carried her into the solitude of her quarters. There at last she let her hands tremble. Not because of fear, not because of doubt, but because she had realized something terrifying. The machine had wanted victory at any cost. She had wanted humanity at any cost. And somewhere between those two, she had carved a path that left scars on both. How long could she walk that line before it broke? That evening, General Madson found her by the runway. He stood beside her in silence for a long time, both watching the horizon bleed orange. Finally, he said, "They'll write about what you did today." She shook her head. "They'll never know what I didn't do." Madson's eyes narrowed. "Good, that's the part that matters most." She turned to him. For the first time, her voice cracked faintly. "How do you carry it, the weight?" He exhaled slowly. "You don't. You let it carry you. If you try to hold it all, it'll crush you. But if you accept it, if you let the silence move with you, it becomes something else." Her eyes lowered. "And if silence isn't enough?" He looked at her, his face worn, his voice steady. "Then you do what you did today. You act, and you live with it." Eva nodded, her breath slowed, calm returned. That night, alone again, she sat in the dark. The machine pulsed faintly in her mind, not demanding, not instructing, just there. She closed her eyes, thought of the child's eyes, the workers fleeing, the ones who hadn't made it. And then she whispered into the silence, "I am still me." No answer came. But she didn't need one. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.